Hello, everyone. Dr. Ames here. This time I'd like to talk about some information on leadership theories. And so the first obvious question is, are they leaders born or are they made? Well, certainly it's got to be a little bit of both. I don't think it's either way necessarily, although there are fewer of us who are born leaders than there are those of us who can learn to be leaders. Um, it does seem that we have some research out there that very young children exhibit some leadership behaviors at an incredibly early age. But that's not most of us. At the same time, we might go by the old adage that that person is a born leader. We might say like something like that about a certain person because they've impressed us with their behavior that makes us think that they're a leader. And sometimes it does seem that maybe they were born that way. But of course, it's really hard to argue against that. At the same time, I think there's hope for the rest of us who aren't born leaders. Some of us simply have more of those sorts of visionary skills or charisma or gravitas, whatever you want to call it. But the rest of us can learn to be leaders. And that's what's really encouraging about all of this. So, what do? Well, you study those specific knowledge and skills, like you see here, that strong leaders have. And so there are many different theories on what it is to be a leader, many different styles of leadership. And so you study that and you learn what it takes and you try and emulate what works for you in your own life and you're within the bounds of your own personality and the way you view the world. So what are those specific behaviors? Well, we're going to really, I'll get into that in a moment. We'll talk about it. One thing we have to say, some caveats here, is that theories about leadership are generally pretty generic. In other words, they are general and they are just like the study of management itself. It's meant to say you could go and be a manager anywhere in any industry or setting and kind of do the same things. Well, that's generally true, but at some point you do have to learn the type of organization you're in, the specific technical skills that might be needed, and so forth. So, with these theories are general, they apply to nonprofits as much as they do for profit organizations or the public sector and so forth. And you have to accept the fact that although there may be one theory of leadership that works for you and is very efficient and effective from your mindset, it may not be applicable in all situations and it may not work for all people. So we want to get away from the idea that there's one best way to do things. There is no exactly right theory of leadership that's going to do the job. So here's a quick overview of some of the leadership things that we need to talk about. We can look at it from different perspectives and get that knowledge we need to be leaders ourselves if we're just basically managers and leadership seems foreign to us. Well, there are trait theories out there. And trait theories really look at and emphasize those innate characters that any given individual has. In other words, they're about your personality traits. When we say traits, that's what we're really talking about. And so we want to make sure that we understand the difference between traits and skills, because using skills theories is just another way to look at leadership. It's another perspective. Neither one has all the answers, but taken together and knowing something about each gives you a much better understanding. So, traits. What is a trait? Well, honesty is a trait. Openness is a trait. But when you look at skills, communication, that's a skill. Um, and so forth. So we want to keep these things in mind that there's a difference between skills and traits. And we can have many different types of skills. Here's just three of them listed here: technical skills. Um, how do things work? What are the details of the job? Or what are the details of the industry? What are the details of your profession? Or the very specific act, the task that you're doing? Technical skills, understanding kind of the details of what's going on. That's a lot different than human skills. And human skills, just think how complicated that could be. We're talking communication, uh, body language, being a good listener, um, all sorts of things there come into the idea of human skills and what works for one person may not work for another. But we're really talking about the ability to work with other people, to communicate, to understand what they're telling us, and to respond in kinds and make ourselves and our own thoughts and points of view understandable. And of course, conceptual skills are different. The ability to understand ideas, maybe abstract ideas and principles, to think outside of your current little world and ask yourself and the questions of what are the implications, what could happen, what are the best and worst case scenarios. All of those sorts of things are conceptual skills. So many different types of skills and many different types of personality traits. If you're a naturally stubborn person, that's a trait. And it may hinder you as being a very effective and likable leader because of your stubbornness. But you can downplay your stubbornness if you know that's one of your personality traits and not let it come out in your day to day dealings as a leader or manager. And so traits are things that we can identify within ourselves. And we can also adopt traits that we're weak in or that we're lacking, and we can work on those that aren't so good, and we can try and minimize our negative traits. Another way to look at leadership is simply through behavior. And so there are all sorts of behavioral theories on this particular perspective. But the emphasis is on what leaders do or what are the processes for their actions. Well, we can divide that up into nice, easy to understand topics like the task behaviors. Task behaviors are about the things you do on the job, relate to the getting the work done and so forth. How do you go about it? Do you do things in nice, measurable, rational, logical steps, like is pretty common in our culture? Or do you try and multitask? Do you break deadlines and so forth? And then behavior theories have to look at things like relationships. So you get into what is your skill level on communication? How good a listener are you? And so forth. Relationships behaviors. Are you autocratic or are you open minded and very egalitarian? These things matter and people notice your behaviors. And it is one way to understand leadership and to copy the things you like and try and add them to your toolbox and minimize the things you don't like. Now, today, we also can look at things about the situational approach, and this is what we generally teach in management that, the majority of organizations out there today use a contingency approach, which means we look at the situation we're in, we look at the environment, we scan it, and we make decisions on the best way to proceed. And it's okay to use another person's idea as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral. We ought to make a decision contingent on all the factors present and make the best decision. So contingency theory makes sense, and it is kind of the general way we think today. Well, you can be a leader who responds with contingency sort of approach, but in itself, you need some of these other things to really put you over the top. It's not enough of a personal type of theory, other than I would say contingency theory is more of an approach rather than a style of leadership. Um, there are different types of contingency theories. I'll just mention a few. Leader-member relations, where you're trying to build trust and cooperativeness and friendliness between the leader and followers. It could be a contingency theory built on clear task structures about all about the job and the related tasks and so forth, making sure that things are very understandable, there's no ambiguity and so forth. Or it could be a contingency theory based on positional power, the formal authority that the leader holds. Um, if you were to look at all three of those items and say which is the best, you would say that someone following a contingency sort of model and approach to leadership and management, um, when all three of those factors are high, then certainly that is the best leadership situation. And when those factors are low, your member relations, your task structure, and your positional power, if all three are low or 2 out of 3, that's when you're in the worst leadership situation. So that's a contingency approach. Now, certainly servant leadership is completely different. The emphasis here is on your personal values that you bring to the table. You feel that those beliefs and values and so forth that you hold are what's really important to emphasize. So you let everybody know what those are through various ways, communication, role modeling, and so forth. And it shows that you are committed. In a sense, it makes you a more moral leader. You adopt a stance that you are serving others as opposed to your own self interests. Um, and servant leaders, when you do see them, truly see them, you're going to see some very specific traits associated with them: honesty, integrity, character, um, esprit de corps, so to speak, probably charisma, and certainly some empathy. So, servant leadership is something that we would all value, uh, but not all of us can pull that one off. It really takes exceptional individuals to be in a position to do that. Okay, folks, that's all I want to talk about this time. I'll talk to you again soon.